April 12, 1945. The rain over Remagen hasn't stopped for 3 days. The Rhine smells of oil, smoke, and fear. Across a churned-up field, a group of young German soldiers, barely more than boys, stagger through the mud. Private Heinz Richter, 19 years old, clutches a dented mess tin against his chest. He hasn't eaten in almost 2 days. His boots squelch. His stomach growls louder than the distant artillery. He looks at his friend, Kurt Becker, who's limping, blood dried on his sleeve. The front collapsed last night. Their officers vanished before dawn. Now, white cloths tied to sticks flap weakly above their heads. Surrender flags, made from what used to be their undershirts. They had been told surrender meant death. That Americans shot prisoners. That capture was shame worse than a bullet. But Heinz doesn't care anymore. Hunger crushes fear. His hands shake. The cold burns through his uniform like water through paper. A shout breaks through the rain. English. Sure. Commanding. Drop your weapons. Hands up. They obey instantly. Car 98 rifles hit the mud with a dull thud. A dozen American MPs in khaki approach, rifles ready but eyes steady. Their helmets shine with rain. Heinz raises his hands higher. He waits for the shot. It doesn't come. One of the Americans, a tall man with a red patch on his shoulder, steps closer. He's younger than Heinz expected, maybe mid-20s, his face half hidden by the brim of his helmet. He gestures to a canteen strapped to his belt, unscrews it and tosses it toward the nearest prisoner. It lands at Heinz's feet. For a second no one moves. Every muscle in his body tenses. Is it a trick? Then he hears the American say almost gently, "Drink." Heinz bends down, lifts the canteen with trembling fingers and takes a sip. Cold water. Real clean, fresh. It tastes like something he's forgotten existed. He passes it to Kurt, who gulps greedily before gasping, "Why would they?" The American cuts him off in rough German, "You're done fighting." They are herded toward the road, not beaten, not cursed. One GI even helps Kurt when he stumbles. The prisoners exchange uneasy glances. What kind of enemy helps his captives stand? As they march past the destroyed bridgehead at Remagen, Heinz notices something else. The smell. Roasted coffee. Somewhere nearby, American engineers are brewing it over field stoves. He can barely process it. They're drinking coffee, in the middle of war. He looks down at his empty tin, at the dirt caked on his sleeves, at the boots stuffed with newspaper to make them fit. A thought hits him like a hammer. They have so much they can afford kindness. That night, huddled in a makeshift holding pen beside a barn, he writes the first line in his pocket notebook. The first thing they gave us wasn't orders. It was a drink. He doesn't yet know it, but this will be the first entry in a new chapter of his life. A story that will turn everything he was taught inside out. Because tomorrow he will learn what mercy tastes like. They were about to discover a kind of captivity no German soldier had ever imagined. The morning after their capture, a line of exhausted prisoners stands ankle-deep in mud beside a freight yard on the outskirts of Remagen. American soldiers move efficiently, tagging, counting, recording names. A gray mist hangs low over the tracks. Heinz Richter tightens his coat, his fingers numb. Someone beside him mutters, "They'll send us to Siberia." The rumor spreads like frost. Another voice, "I heard they ship prisoners to coal mines. No one comes back." When the engine roars to life, the sound rattles through the metal carriages like thunder. The boxcar doors slam shut. 40 men packed inside each. The smell of sweat, rust, and wet wool fills the air. Someone coughs. Heinz presses his ear to the plank wall. The train screeches, lurches forward. Through a narrow crack between boards, he catches glimpses of a passing world. Ruined towns, blackened chimneys, the blurred outlines of French villages. He writes in his notebook, the pencil barely leaving marks on the damp paper. They told us the journey ends in Siberia. But the train went west. Each mile feels unreal. No guards screaming. No beatings. Just the rhythmic clatter of the wheels and the faint scent of diesel smoke. When the train halts for food, American MPs toss loaves of bread into each car. Whole loaves, soft, white, still warm from a field oven. The men stare as if it's gold. Kurt tears one open. "It smells like home," he whispers. The train moves again, days blending into each other. The air grows salty, damp. Heinz notices seagulls. He's never seen one before. Across the ocean, one sergeant says through the slats. No one believes him. Until one evening the wind carries something new, the smell of salt water, tar, and fish. They reach the port of Le Havre. The sky glows red with sunset. Rows of American ships line the harbor, their hulls marked with white stars. Gangways stretch like bridges to another world. The prisoners stare in silence. Some cry openly, from relief, from fear, from the sheer impossibility of it all. On the dock, a medic waves them toward a table stacked with tin cups. Warm soup, thick, spiced, nothing like the watery broth of the Wehrmacht. Heinz can't stop staring at the Americans serving it, clean uniforms, cigarettes between their lips, casual smiles as if this were a train station, not the aftermath of a world war. One of the guards, a red-haired corporal, hands him a cup and says in slow German, "Welcome to America soon." Heinz blinks. America? The corporal nods. Yes, Texas. The words don't make sense. Texas, the name sounds like a fairy tale. As they're herded up the ramp toward a waiting Liberty ship, Heinz turns for one last look at Europe, gray, broken, smoldering behind him. He can still hear Kurt whisper, "Do you think they'll feed us there too?" He doesn't answer. He just looks down at the soup in his hands, thick with meat and potatoes, and realizes, we are prisoners of the richest nation on earth. The ship's horn bellows. The deck trembles. The horizon swallows France. And as the ocean opens before them, none of the men know that this journey, born in defeat, will become the first time they ever taste abundance. May 2nd, 1945, 3:40 p.m. The train slows to a stop outside Austin, Texas. The heat hits first, thick, dry, alive. As the boxcar doors slide open, sunlight pours in like a flood. The prisoners blink, shielding their eyes. No rubble. No smoke. No ruins. Just wide, open fields and rows of whitewashed barracks standing clean under a blue sky. They step down one by one, exhausted, filthy, hollow-eyed, waiting for shouting dogs' blows. But there is only order. Barbed wire fences glint in the sun, not blood-stained, not torn, tidy. A wooden sign reads, Camp Swift, U.S. Army POW Camp. Heinz Richter looks around. The ground is dry, swept. The guards' uniforms are crisp, their boots polished. Even the watchtowers look painted, not menacing. He writes later in his diary. It was strange. Everything was clean. Even the fences looked as if someone cared for them. They're led to a barack, 30 bunks, all with sheets. The air smells faintly of wood, starch, and soap. A sergeant with a southern accent calls out, "Showers, then chow." The men look at each other, unsure what the last word means. Steam rises from a shed nearby. Inside pipes hiss. Hot water. Real hot water. They step under it like men entering heaven. For the first time in years, the dirt runs off. Thick, brown, endless. A private hands them bars of soap that smell sharp, clean, and unfamiliar. Pine, lemon, something wild. Heinz presses the bar to his nose. His eyes sting. I had forgotten what clean smelled like. They dry themselves with real towels, rough but fresh, and change into denim overalls stamped PW. Outside the sun is lower now. Shadows stretch across the yard. The guards talk among themselves, easy and unguarded. One lights a cigarette and laughs at a joke the others can't hear. Heinz watches them for a long moment, puzzled. They laugh. In war, he whispers. A young soldier passes, carrying a bucket of coffee. He nods politely to Heinz, not as to an enemy but a man. That night, sitting on his bunk under the hum of the single bulb, Heinz writes a short letter home on a scrap of paper the Red Cross provides. His handwriting trembles slightly, still unsure if it's safe to hope. Mother, we are in Texas. There is order. Hot water. Soap that smells like pine. The guards speak gently and laugh as if they have never seen death. If this is captivity, then I do not understand freedom. He places the letter in the outbox and lies back. Outside, the cicadas hum in the warm night air. He closes his eyes to the faint sound of American music from a distant radio, a tune that sounds like peace. May 3rd, 1945, 8:20 a.m. The sun rises hard and bright over Camp Swift, cutting across the dust. The smell of coffee drifts through the yard, rich, warm, and almost mocking to men who haven't tasted it in years. A whistle blows. Form up for registration. The prisoners shuffle into line, their new denim overalls stiff and unfamiliar against clean skin. The memory of hot water still clings to them, unreal like something borrowed. Inside the main building, tables are arranged in neat rows, clipboards stacked high. At the end of the first table sits Lieutenant Robert McNeil, U.S. Army Medical Corps. Mid-30s. Calm eyes. A pencil behind his ear. He doesn't shout. He doesn't sneer. He just says, "Next," and gestures for the first man. One by one, the Germans step forward. Thermometer under the tongue. Pulse checked. Notes made. Every man gets a medical tag punched from metal and a small card with his name, number, and camp section. When it's Heinz Richter's turn, McNeil looks up. "You speak English?" Heinz hesitates, then nods slightly. "Good," McNeil says, writing something. "You're in Barack 12B. Any wounds or fever?" "No, sir." The word "sir" slips out automatically. He's not sure why. McNeil nods once. "All right then. Next." Further down the line, another officer hands out bags, 2 sets of denim overalls, socks, undershirts, and underwear. The fabric is coarse but clean. The smell of laundry soap fills the room, heavy, sweet, chemical. Kurt, behind Heinz, runs his hand over the folded cloth, eyes wide. "They give us this to keep?" When the group moves outside, the disbelief deepens. Near the fence, a low building hums with sound, metal tubs, wooden boards, steam rising in white clouds. Women in civilian aprons, American camp workers, scrub sheets and uniforms in great vats of hot, soapy water. The floor is wet, shining. Heinz stops walking. He watches the water swirl down a drain. Clean. Endless. He murmurs to no one. Clean water everywhere. Buckets of soap. "I thought if they waste this on us, what do they give their own?" A guard walking past hears it and grins. "We got plenty to go around, fella." Heinz nods politely, but inside he can't understand. In Germany, his mother boiled the same bucket of water 3 times to wash clothes. Here it pours freely, hot, clear, constant. By 11:10 a.m., registration is complete. The men are dismissed to their barracks. Some sit on their bunks in silence, clutching the fabric of their new uniforms as if afraid they'll vanish. Heinz writes in his diary before lunch. "They tag us, test us, feed us, but with care. The officers treat us not like enemies but patients. If this is war's punishment, then perhaps mercy is the victor." Through the open window he hears laughter again, easy, unforced, American. He looks down at the tag around his neck, the soap still in his pocket, and for the first time since capture he feels something dangerous. Peace. May 3, 1945, 12:05 p.m. The bell rings through Camp Swift, one sharp clang, then another. The guards call it chow time. To the German prisoners it sounds like a summons to the unknown. Heinz Richter and his friend Kurt file into line, tin trays in hand. The air is heavy with heat and a smell that makes their stomachs ache. Onions frying, meat roasting, butter melting. The canteen hums with sound, spoons clinking, pans sizzling, the faint crackle of a radio playing a country tune. For men who'd been living on cabbage water and sawdust bread, the scent feels almost cruel. The last time Heinz smelled onions like this was 1942, his mother's kitchen in Kassel before the bombs. A voice shouts, "Next." He steps forward. A soldier behind the counter ladles thick brown gravy over 2 slices of roast beef, steaming, glistening, soft enough to fall apart. Then mashed potatoes, a whole mound of them, with a pool of melted butter swirling at the center. Next, a scoop of corn, a slice of white bread, real butter. And finally, a wedge of apple pie, still warm, cinnamon rising in the air like something sacred. Heinz stares at the tray. It looks impossible. He whispers, "Are we supposed to share this for a week?" The guard, a young man barely older than him, laughs. "Nah. That's just lunch, son. Eat up. There's more if you want." Heinz freezes. His hands tremble. He's not sure if it's hunger or disbelief. They sit at long wooden tables polished smooth by time. For a moment, no one eats. The room feels suspended, a strange silence full of caution. Then, somewhere near the back, a fork scrapes. A man takes a small bite. Then another. Heinz watches Kurt cut the meat into tiny pieces, as if rationing each second of flavor. Butter slides down the potatoes, glistening under the light. Heinz dips his spoon and tastes. The salt, the warmth, the softness. He shuts his eyes. He doesn't chew right away. He just holds it there, letting the taste undo him. He whispers to himself, "It can't be real." Across the table, one man slips a piece of bread into his pocket. Not stealing, just instinct. For years, hunger trained their hands to hide food before thought could intervene. The guard watching sees it. Says nothing. Just smiles quietly. Another prisoner, older, breaks down crying. Not loudly, just tears rolling as he eats. His spoon clatters on the tray. He wipes his face with the back of his sleeve, muttering, "Forgive me. I can't remember how to eat." Heinz glances around, 30 men, 30 stories of disbelief. Kurt finally laughs, softly at first, then harder. "God help me," he says between bites. "I think I love these Americans." Heinz doesn't laugh. He just keeps eating slowly, reverently. When the apple pie comes, he stares at it for a full minute before touching it. The crust flakes under the fork. The inside, sweet, tart, filled with warm slices of apple. He hasn't tasted sugar in 2 years. His throat closes. He swallows hard. By the end, no one speaks. The hall is filled only with quiet chewing, sighs, the clatter of trays. The kind of silence that isn't emptiness, it's awe. Heinz writes that night in his notebook. Today they gave us a meal that could feed a family. Meat, butter, pie, all at once. I kept waiting for someone to take it away. But they smiled as if feeding us was nothing. One man hid bread in his pocket. I did not. For the first time since I can remember, I wasn't afraid of being hungry. At 1:10 p.m., the guards open the mess hall doors. The men step out blinking into the sun. The smell of butter and smoke lingers on their hands. Behind them, the cooks scrape leftovers into bins, uneaten food. Some prisoners stop and stare, frozen. Kurt shakes his head slowly. They throw food away, he whispers. They have so much they don't even need it. Heinz doesn't reply. He just stands there, watching a guard pour out a half-empty pot of gravy into a drain. Feels like watching gold melt into the earth. At 1:25 p.m., the camp loudspeaker hums. Work detail starts at 2. Rest in barracks until then. But no one lies down right away. Some sit outside just staring at their hands, still sticky with butter, still smelling faintly of cinnamon. Heinz looks at the horizon, endless sky, cotton clouds, freedom in every direction yet locked behind fences. And he writes one last note before lights out that night. They call it captivity. But here I have eaten more in one meal than in 6 months of war. They feed us like men. Perhaps this is what victory tastes like. May 14, 1945, Camp Swift, Texas. The sun hangs high over the barracks, heat rippling through the air like a mirage. Inside the recreation hut, something strange is happening. From an old wooden radio, Glenn Miller's In the Mood bursts through the static. Trumpets bright, drums snapping like fireworks. The sound fills the camp, wild and alive. German prisoners look up from their chessboards and carving benches, frozen mid-motion. To men raised under the Reich's iron discipline, this isn't music, it's chaos. Heinz Richter sits on a bench, head tilted, watching the guards tapping their boots and laughing. The rhythm makes his heart race, but not with fear, with confusion. Kurt elbows him. This would be banned in Berlin. Heinz nods slowly. Maybe that's why it's beautiful. For years they were told that jazz was degenerate music, the sound of disorder and decay. But here in this American camp, the guards whistle it freely, their smiles unforced, their steps light. Feels like watching freedom dance. Later that afternoon, the same song drifts from the mess hall window as Heinz helps move crates from the storeroom. Inside, a few Americans are drinking something from glass bottles, dark brown, fizzing at the top. One of them, Private Bill Sanders, catches Heinz staring and grins. You never had a Coke, have you? Heinz shakes his head. Coke. Bill nods, twists off the cap and hands him the bottle. Coca-Cola. American classic. Heinz lifts it cautiously. The glass sweats in his hand, cold, heavy, almost elegant. He takes a sip. For a second he freezes, then coughs violently. The bubbles explode against his tongue, his nose, his throat. Kurt, standing beside him, bursts out laughing. They drink this every day? Heinz sputters, eyes watering. Bill laughs too. Every day? Son, some folks drink 3 or 4 a day. Kurt can't stop laughing. It's the kind of laughter that comes from disbelief and relief all at once. The sound of 2 years of tension cracking open. Heinz wipes his mouth and takes another sip. This time he doesn't cough. It's sweet. Sure. Effervescent. The taste of something that feels alive. He stares at the bottle for a long moment, tracing the embossed letters with his thumb. Back home, people stood in ration lines for a single loaf of bread. Here, men drink sugar just because they can. He scribbles later in his diary. They drink it cold. Like liquid laughter. I thought America's power was its weapons. Now I think it is this sweetness, freedom, excess. That evening after dinner, the POWs gather near the fence as the sun dips low. Beyond the wire, they can see the town lights flicker in the distance, neon signs glowing in red and gold. Music floats from a truck radio near the gate. Benny Goodman, sing, sing, sing. Kurt leans against the fence and whispers, if Berlin could see this, Heinz replies softly, they'd call it corruption. Kurt grins. Then I hope I stay corrupted. A few guards bring out a phonograph and invite some of the prisoners closer. Bill drops the needle and the record spins again, jazz rhythm, swing. The Americans start clapping in time. One even dances, half serious, his boots thudding the dirt. At first, the Germans just watch. Then one by one they begin tapping their feet. The rhythm catches them off guard. Unpredictable, joyful, human. A guard jokes, "Go on, Fritz. You can dance, we won't tell Berlin." Laughter ripples through the crowd. In that moment, the fence seems smaller. The guards aren't wardens, the prisoners aren't enemies. They're just young men, caught in the same melody, sharing the same evening air. May 15, 1945, 8 a.m. breakfast in the mess hall. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. The men eat quietly, still talking about the strange music, the strange drink. One says, "If they lied about America, what else did they lie about?" Heinz stares at his reflection in the coffee cup, the dark liquid rippling as the ceiling fan hums overhead. He whispers to himself, maybe the truth is louder than propaganda. Later, at work detail, he overhears Bill humming "In the Mood." Without realizing it, Heinz hums along. When Bill notices, he doesn't say anything. He just smiles and keeps the rhythm going. That night, Heinz sits by the barracks window, the empty Coca-Cola bottle beside his cot. He turns it slowly in his hand, watching the way it catches the lamplight. The bottle, the music, the laughter, they all feel dangerous, but not in the way bombs or guns did. This danger is gentler, infectious, transformative. He writes one more line before sleep. They said we were fighting monsters. But monsters don't play music like this. Monsters don't feed you pie or share their drink. The war made us blind. America made us see. He sets the diary aside, lies back, and listens to the radio humming faintly through the night air. Somewhere beyond the wire, another record begins to play, jazz again, the sound of a world still moving forward. He closes his eyes. For the first time, he isn't dreaming of home. He's dreaming of a jukebox in a far-off country that let him taste freedom one sip at a time. Camp Swift, Texas, summer 1945. The war is nearing its end, but inside the fences, the war inside the men continues. Each morning, the bell rings for breakfast. The line moves slowly, the smell of eggs, toast, and butter filling the mess hall. Most men eat in silence. Not out of discipline, but disbelief. Even after months, they still can't eat freely. Heinz watches a man named Otto break his toast into tiny pieces, 4 equal squares. He eats one and wraps the rest in a napkin, tucking it inside his shirt pocket. No one tells him not to. The guards see it every day and say nothing. Kurt, sitting beside him, stares at the pile of breadcrumbs on his tray. He leans forward, whispering, "If we waste it, they might take it away." Heinz nods slowly, though he knows it's not true. The pantry is always full. The cook's always smiling. Still, his hand trembles slightly as he lifts his fork. After the meal, the prisoners gather outside under the morning sun. A few smoke, others talk about home. But most keep their pockets stuffed. A biscuit here, an apple core, even folded napkins. These are not greedy men. They are men who once fought rats for bread crusts in the snow. Men who learned that food was life, and life could vanish overnight. In the laundry room, Heinz helps wash uniforms. He finds a spoon hidden under someone's pillow, a piece of sugar wrapped in paper, a tiny jar of jam half empty but sealed with care. He doesn't report it. Instead, he writes that night in his notebook. "We live as if the famine still follows us. Even in safety, we hoard crumbs, not from hunger, but from memory." One evening, a storm hits. Rain pounds the tin roofs, thunder rolls over the camp. Inside the barracks, a few men huddle by the stove, drying their socks. Bill Sanders, the American guard, walks in carrying a box. He opens it and sets it on the table, biscuits wrapped neatly in wax paper. "Extra from the kitchen," he says. "Help yourselves." No one moves at first. Then one man, old and quiet, takes a biscuit and bites half, saving the rest in his pocket. Bill laughs softly. "You don't have to save it, friend. There's more tomorrow." The man nods but doesn't stop chewing slowly, eyes distant. Old reflexes. They don't disappear. Days later, during inspection, Heinz sees a guard toss leftovers from the canteen into a bin, good bread, uneaten fruit, slices of meat. Without thinking, his stomach twists. He walks closer, blurting out, "You throw this away?" The guard shrugs. "We can't keep it long. Goes bad." Heinz stares at the waste, his voice barely above a whisper. "In my country, people would fight for that." That night, he can't sleep. He writes, "Here food is endless. In Germany, hunger has no end. I fear that when I go home, I will never eat without guilt again." The next morning, he sits at breakfast with Kurt. Steam rises from their plates. Kurt takes a bite, then sets down his fork and looks at Heinz. "You think we'll ever stop saving food?" Heinz smiles faintly, shakes his head. No. We'll just find new ways to hide it. They both laugh quietly, a tired kind of laughter. The kind that comes from men who know they'll never be hungry again, but will always feel like they could be. You can feed a man, but you can't unteach hunger. Even kindness cannot erase the muscle memory of fear. These men were full, yet part of them was still starving. Heinz closing his notebook, whispering to himself. The war took our stomachs first. Then it took our trust. The food has returned, but the trust never will. July 1945, Kansas. The train from Texas rattles across miles of golden fields, the sky so wide it seems to swallow everything. Through the cracks of the wooden boxcar, Heinz Richter sees rows of wheat swaying like waves. For the first time since the war began, the world looks peaceful. When they arrive at the siding near Salina, Kansas, the air smells of cut grass and summer dust. The men climb down, thinner than soldiers, thicker than ghosts. They blink into the sunlight as a local farmer in suspenders shouts, "Welcome to God's country, boys." Heinz looks around, unsure if it's a joke. But it isn't. They are loaded into trucks and driven to a nearby farm where the horizon stretches endlessly. A painted sign reads Clark Family Farm, established 1912. It doesn't look like war. It looks like something out of memory. By midday the work begins, picking sugar beets, clearing weeds, stacking hay under a sky so clear it feels like glass. The guards lean against fence posts, smoking in the heat, barely watching. The prisoners work quietly, rhythmically, grateful for motion, for purpose, for anything that feels like life. Sweat runs down their backs. The Kansas sun is merciless, but it's honest, not cruel like the whip or the gun. Around noon, a woman walks from the farmhouse, carrying a wicker basket and a pitcher beaded with condensation. She wears a blue cotton dress and a straw hat. Her name is Martha Clark, the farmer's wife. She waves at the guards, then walks straight toward the prisoners. At first, the men freeze, unsure what to do. Civilians don't approach them like this. But Martha just smiles. "It's hot out here," she says, her voice gentle but firm. "You boys need lemonade." The guards exchange a glance, but don't stop her. She begins pouring tall glasses from the pitcher, pale yellow, filled with ice cubes that clink like tiny bells. Heinz stares at the glass in disbelief. He hasn't seen ice in years. Martha notices his hesitation. "Go on, sweetheart. It won't bite." The word sweetheart makes him flinch, but she says it like she means it. He takes a sip. The cold stings his teeth. The sugar jolts through him like electricity. Then she reaches into the basket and pulls out sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, thick with ham, lettuce, and mustard. She hands one to Heinz. "You remind me of my son," she says softly. "He's about your age. Fights somewhere in France. Maybe he's eating now too." Heinz's fingers tremble as he takes it. He tries to speak, to say danky or thank you, but his throat won't move. Instead, he just nods, eyes stinging, voice trapped behind years of discipline. Around him, the other prisoners eat slowly, almost reverently. Martha pours another glass, smiles again, then says, "You boys work hard. God bless you." And with that, she walks back to the farmhouse, dust swirling around her skirt. No guard stops her. No one laughs. For a few seconds, the only sound is chewing, and the steady whisper of wine through the wheat. That night, after work, Heinz sits on the edge of his cot, notebook open, pencil shaking in his hand. He writes carefully, pressing each word as though it must be true. "A woman gave me bread and called me son. I was her enemy, but she looked at me as if I was hers. I do not know what to do with that." By late August, the POWs have become part of the rhythm of Kansas. They pick beets, mend fences, harvest wheat. Farmers greet them by name. Children wave when they pass on wagons. Some evenings, the guards let them sit by the fence and watch the sun sink into the prairie, the light spilling gold over everything. One of the locals brings a harmonica, plays Home on the Range. Simple, slow, and strangely comforting. Heinz closes his eyes and listens. The music reminds him of nothing he's known, but everything he's needed. September 1945. Autumn creeps in, cool winds chasing the heat from the fields. The harvest is nearly over. Heinz's hands are calloused, his arms sunburnt, his heart lighter than he can explain. He writes again in his notebook. "We work under the same sky, breathe the same air, and for the first time in years I sleep without fear. The Americans call this captivity, but I call it living." He looks around the camp, the men laughing softly by the fire barrels, a guard sharing his cigarette, the stars glittering like frost above. He whispers, "We are prisoners, yet freer than we were." For the first time since leaving Germany, he feels something that frightens him more than battle ever did: peace. And he realizes that maybe this is what the war was meant to teach him all along. That sometimes the people you're told to fear are the ones who show you how to be human again. October 1945, Camp Swift, Texas. The cicadas hum outside the barracks as Heinz Richter sits under a flickering bulb, pen trembling in his hand. A stack of army stationery lies before him, the kind stamped inspected by U.S. military post. He's written dozens of letters since arriving, but tonight's feels heavier. He smooths the paper, takes a deep breath, and begins. Liebe Mutter, dear mother, I am alive. And I must tell you something you will not believe. The Americans feed us like guests. He pauses. The words look strange, almost dangerous. But they are true. He continues. We have milk every morning. Eggs, bread, butter, soft butter, real butter. They give us stew with meat, apples so big they shine, and coffee that smells like heaven. I thought it was for the officers, but no, it is for all of us. Sometimes I think I am dreaming, and the dream tastes like food. He hesitates, glancing around the dim barracks. Most of the men are asleep. A few murmur in their bunks, whispering about home, about parents they may never see again. He adds one more line. They treat us better than our own did. I don't understand this country, but I am starting to admire it. When he signs his name, his hand shakes slightly, not from exhaustion but from fear. He knows these words could be seen as betrayal if intercepted. And yet he writes them anyway, because the truth feels too large to stay silent. Weeks later, across the Atlantic, trains still move through the wreckage of Germany. At a mail depot outside Frankfurt, stacks of POW letters pile up, waiting for approval from the Nazi postal censors still clinging to their collapsing duties. Among them lies Heinz's letter, folded neatly, smelling faintly of coffee and dust. The censor unfolds it, reads a few lines, and stops at the word butter. Then another, freedom. The official frowns, takes out a black stamp marked verboten, and presses it hard across the page. The letter never leaves the depot. By dawn, it's tossed into a bin with dozens of others, burned in a stove behind the office. The flames swallow the ink, the paper curling and blackening, the words fading before they can cross the sea. But truth, once written, never really dies. Years later, 1963, in a small archive in Munich, a historian sorting through American military correspondence finds a bundle of unsent letters labeled POW, Texas Camp 1945. Among them are pages written by men like Heinz. One reads, "They have milk, butter, eggs. Where does it come from? Endless fields. We thought the world was starving, but America has no end." Another, from a man named Dieter Krantz. "Here they joke, they share, they waste nothing. I have learned more about freedom from their canteen line than I did in all my training." The historian places the letters in protective sleeves, her eyes lingering on the last line of one note, scribbled in faded pencil. If abundance is possible, why do we build empires instead of gardens? Back in 1945, Heinz never knew his mother would die without reading his words. He only knew that writing them made him feel clean again, like soap washing off the dirt of lies. On his next workday in Kansas, he picks up his shovel, breathes in the scent of wheat and rain, and thinks about the words that never made it home. But perhaps he decides the world doesn't need his letter. Maybe the real message is in the act itself. A prisoner choosing honesty over hate, choosing to remember the taste of milk, not the sound of bombs. That night he writes in his notebook, "I do not know if my letter will reach you, Mother. But if it does, remember this. America fights with food, not fists. And they are winning the world by feeding it." He folds the page, tucks it into his pocket, and lies back under the endless Texas stars. For the first time, he doesn't feel like a soldier or a captive, only a witness. The fences around him are still there, but they no longer look like barriers. They look like lines on a map, dividing nations, not humanity. And as sleep finally takes him, the last thought he has is simple, unguarded, and true. Abundance is freedom. And freedom tastes like bread. May 8, 1945, Camp Swift, Texas. The day begins like any other. Sunlight through Baroque windows, the smell of coffee drifting through the mess hall, distant laughter from the guard post. But before breakfast, a siren blares once. Short. Then silence. The men step outside, confused. A crowd gathers near the flagpole. An American lieutenant stands on a wooden crate, a sheet of paper trembling in his hands. He clears his throat, voice carrying across the yard, "Attention all personnel and prisoners. Germany has surrendered. The war is over." For a moment, no one breathes. The words hang in the hot air like dust after an explosion, suspended, unreal. Then, somewhere in the back of the crowd, a man falls to his knees. Another begins to cry. The rest just stand frozen, hands at their sides, faces blank, waiting for orders that will never come. Heinz Richter doesn't move. He feels the Texas wind on his face, the sun on his neck, and a strange weight in his stomach. Not hunger, but something deeper. The Americans lower their flag halfway, the fabric catching the light. A quiet gesture of respect. No cheers, no mockery. Only silence. The guard beside him, Bill Sanders, takes off his cap and murmurs, "It's finished, son." Heinz turns to him slowly. "Finished?" he whispers. "What does that mean?" Bill exhales. "Means you're going home soon." Heinz looks down at the ground. The dirt between his boots feels steady, real. Home. The word feels foreign now, heavier than ever. What was home? The ruins of Hamburg? The faces of neighbors gone? The echo of orders shouted in empty streets? He doesn't answer. Instead, he glances at the mess hall nearby, the tables inside still set for breakfast. Eggs, bread, butter, milk. He walks toward it quietly, away from the others, and sits at one of the long wooden tables. His tray is empty. He runs his hand across the smooth surface and whispers to himself, "Home? To what?" The guard at the door hears but says nothing. He remembers his mother's kitchen before the war, thin soup, ration cards, fear. He remembers the marches, the shouting, the cold. And he remembers the first day here, the apple, the pie, the laughter. He had eaten well for the first time in years and it had felt like peace. Now it feels like guilt. Outside, the Americans are folding their flag. A faint breeze carries the sound of distant music from a radio, "Don't Fence Me In" by Bing Crosby, a song about freedom. Heinz listens from the window, unsure whether to smile or cry. Around him, men talk in hushed voices, some joyful, some numb. A few whisper about rebuilding, others about returning to nothing. Someone says, "At least we survived." Another answers softly, "Yes, but the best part of us didn't." That night, Heinz writes one last entry in his notebook. "The war is over. We are alive, yet I feel like I have lost something I cannot name. I have eaten bread that tastes of mercy, and now I must return to hunger, not of the body but of the soul. I do not know if I deserve what I have seen here. They taught us to hate. The Americans taught us to live." He closes the notebook, tucks it under his pillow, and lies awake listening to the crickets outside. Tomorrow they will begin the long journey home, not to Germany but to its shadow. Yet somewhere deep inside, Heinz carries something no one can take from him. The memory of a meal shared without hatred, of laughter shared without fear, of a kindness so ordinary it became sacred. He turns on his side, staring at the window where the moonlight spills across the floor, and whispers the only prayer he knows. "Let me never forget how mercy tastes." Hamburg, 1946. The war is over, but peace feels colder than captivity. Snow falls in thin, gray flakes over what used to be streets. Now it's rubble and silence. Buildings lean like broken teeth. The air smells of soot, damp wood, and hunger. Heinz Richter walks carefully through the ruins, his American-issued boots caked with mud. His coat hangs loose, one size too big, a hand-me-down from the camp that freed him. In his pocket, a small paper tag still bears the faded words, "Camp Swift, Texas." He passes a line of people clutching tin bowls, waiting for soup from a relief station. No one speaks. Every face is the same, hollow, gray eyes like ash. He stops beside a shattered wall where a child sits, thin as a twig, maybe 10 years old. The boy's cheeks are sunken, his hands raw from cold. He looks up when Heinz kneels beside him. From his bag, Heinz pulls out his ration, a crust of bread, small and hard, wrapped in paper. He breaks it in half and offers it to the boy. The child hesitates. "For me?" Heinz nods. "Eat." The boy takes it slowly, clutching it with both hands like treasure. Heinz smiles faintly and adds, "In America, a guard once told me, 'Eat, there's more if you want.'" The boy looks up, eyes wide. "More?" he asks softly, as if testing a word he's never used before. Heinz nods again. The boy stares at him for a long moment, chewing in silence. Then he whispers, "That sounds like a fairy tale." Heinz doesn't answer. He just watches the snow drift down between the ruins, white dust over a dead city. That night, he finds shelter in what's left of a school gymnasium, now a refugee hall. The roof leaks. The floor creaks. But it's warm. He sits near a barrel fire with others. Widows, orphans, broken men, all sharing scraps of bread and quiet stories of what used to be. In the firelight, Heinz unwraps his notebook. The same one he carried across the Atlantic, the same one he filled with stories of food, kindness, and strange mercy. Most of the ink has faded. But the last words still shine under the flame. Abundance is freedom. Freedom tastes like bread. He closes the book, presses it against his chest, and looks around the room. Everywhere people huddle together, sharing warmth, breaking the little they have into smaller pieces. And suddenly he understands something he hadn't before. America hadn't just given him food, it had shown him what civilization really meant. Not flags or speeches or victory parades, but the simple act of giving when you could keep. Outside, dawn creeps over Hamburg, gray sky, broken chimneys, thin smoke. He steps out into the cold and watches children chase the first flakes of snow down the street. Their laughter, faint and fragile, sounds almost like music. He smiles. Maybe mercy survives after all. As he walks away, his voice echoes softly, almost like a prayer. They went to war hungry for power, and came back hungry for bread. Based on real testimonies from German POWs held in the United States, 1944 to 1946. If this story reminded you that kindness is stronger than hate, remember to keep it alive. Subscribe for the next untold chapter of humanity.